Well, I want to welcome you to this podcast, which is entitled Funding Your Future Now. And my name is Dr. Randy Dirks, and it's my delight to have you here. I've been a fundraising executive for 25 years. And today I've got a guest with me that really speaks from the whole area of the leadership world and strategy. And how do you communicate messages in a way that are filled with clarity, character, and consistency? And his name is Chris McClure. And he is a founder and CEO of Lead Life Big, which I think is just a great title. Works a lot with leadership and strategy coaching. And the reason why this podcast will be of real value is that my audience is fundraising professionals and presidents of organizations. And constantly we're looking at the issue, how do I effectively or more effectively communicate my message? So it's clear, it's concise, it's consistent. And we're going to dive into that today. So Chris, welcome. So glad you could join us. And why don't you just take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. Thanks. I really appreciate this invitation. It's we found each other on LinkedIn and I have checked out the show and I know it's a fairly new show, but you're doing some great things. I love seeing the different topics that you're covering because it does matter so much, to really fund these missions and causes that are so great out there that are needed out there. So, but yeah, my background, my journey's been a little interesting. So I was a youth pastor for 15 years. I was an executive pastor in a local church, 3 different local churches. And then I was always a growing leader and I wanted to help not just people inside the churches I was serving, but out in the business community. And so I basically had a transition about 5 to 10 years ago, progressively, where I entered the business community where I was doing coaching and training with small business owners, executive teams, mid-level managers. And a lot of it just came because I just saw that leadership, it's always hard, right? Leadership is always challenging, but I think a lot of people they don't know where to begin sometimes, or they're kind of stuck. And so the clarity piece that I always help people with is kind of identifying where are you today and where do you want to go and how can we get there? And so I help people navigate that on a personal level, but also with their teams so that they can really have the productive outcomes that they really desire. So I'm also the vice president of our local chamber of commerce. So I work with small business leaders every day where we're helping them promote their business, helping them with resources. The chamber itself is a nonprofit, right? So we're constantly thinking about how do we fund our mission. And so there's a lot of connectivity here that I'm excited about to talk about today, Randy.
Wow, it's great. I love your diverse background because it gives you the ability to speak into a variety of audiences. Well, you talk about helping leaders build what you call magnetic organizations that naturally attract talent and opportunity. And in the nonprofit world, we're constantly trying to attract partners, people
Right.
that'll come in and join us financially, supporters. So a question would be this: what are maybe 1 or 2 core leadership practices that you believe transform an organization from one that has to chase funding, which often can happen, to one that where donors actively are engaged and they're interested and they want to learn more about what's going on? So what would you say would be those core principles?
Yeah, actually I have 3 things as I was thinking about this. One is just clarity. Going back to that clarity question is your mission and vision clear? And what I mean by that is it clear enough to attract the right people? Because I think, and I'm going to dive into this, I think a little bit later as we chat too, but when you don't have a mission or a clear vision, a clear message, you may think that you're talking to the right people, but they may not feel like they're the right people. So I think a lot of times it's that clarity piece of how clear are you in your communication, even if it's in your mind, is it actually what you're saying? And then also like on your publication materials, marketing materials, everything. I got to thinking about this where years ago I was at a conference. I heard John Maxwell share this where he said that when he was casting vision, he would often laminate like a vision statement card until basically write down a vision of what he was working on. And he would laminate that and he would sit down across the table from someone and say, would you read this and see if this is compelling to you? Is this something you want to be a part of? And the thing that I always talk about from magnetic leadership, Randy, is that it both attracts and repels. And we can't be afraid of repelling the wrong people. We have to be focused on making sure we're clear enough to attract the right people. So that's the first thing, is that clarity of mission and vision and your messaging. The second thing is really understanding your donors' goals. What do they want to accomplish with their personal finances or corporate finances? Are, finding that out, asking them questions about what are their goals? What would they like to accomplish by being a partner with you? Because some people, they're willing to give maybe a lot more money if they really feel like there's an alignment personally or professionally. Once again, you can't assume that everybody has the same motivation. And so I think sitting down and
Right.
having conversations to because then you're helping them actually achieve goals. It's not just about you meeting your goals as an organization. So I think that's key. And then finally, and it's tied together with all this, is building and strengthening the relationships. Really playing the long game where you're not trying to be transactional, just trying to get somebody to write the check or give one time to a campaign or whatever it may be, but to truly care about the people that you're talking to and the donors and the supporters, the partners that you're reaching. I think when you really make it a relational engagement, I
Mhm.
think it just changes the tone of things. And then once again, you're inviting people to partner with you to accomplish that clear mission, vision, and cause.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to jump in a moment into vision a little bit more, but just a comment. I think sometimes a bit of a problem that we have as fundraising professionals is we're interested in what we have, and so what we do is we go and we tend to dump on that new person or someone that's getting to
Mhm.
learn about us, and it's all about us. Your point was so well taken. You need to find out about that other individual. What
Yeah.
moves them? What's important to them? How did they grow up? How did that factor into the, family dynamics that they came from, that things that really are important to them today. And so if
Mhm.
we don't start there, we'll have people nodding,
Yep.
being sort of nice to us, and they may give a check, but it tends to be a tip. It
Yeah.
doesn't tend to be significant long term. So I love that focus. Well, here's another question, and we'll pick up a little bit more on vision. Nonprofit leaders are often really pretty knowledgeable about their mission, or some of them are quite brilliant,
Mhm.
whether it be medical work or education of children, they understand that, they live in those worlds. But when it comes to articulating the vision in a
Mhm.
way that compels somebody to write a check and to write some significant checks, maybe over a period of years, that's where the struggle happens. So you specialize in leaders in helping them, and one of the C's you mentioned was clarity, and you alluded to that already. What's your process if you were to work with a leader of a nonprofit organization helping them to distill a complex, heart-driven mission, which they feel, and may
Mhm.
be a little complex, into a message that's both authentic and irresistible for potential funders? What does that process look like?
Yeah, I think the first thing is really ensuring that you do have a simple, clearly articulated vision because like you said, Randy, already that if you're living this every day, you have all sorts of directions you can go with this, right? You can talk about it for hours. But when you're sitting down with somebody who maybe they're new to your organization, maybe it's somebody that you've just been introduced to for the first time, how can you simply and clearly articulate it so you don't get into that trap of word salad, just kind of spilling onto everybody or being fuzzy or confusing because you talk about all these different things that you have going on. I think that keeping things simple is really important. We are so bombarded with noise and messaging today and the digital world that we live in and, mass media and everything. So can you simply articulate your vision in a way that makes somebody understand what your organization is about, who you're helping, who you're serving, what value you can bring to donors and partners that come alongside you. I think that's key. The second thing is to really be clear on asking specifically for what you need rather than being too general and vague.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times that's one of the biggest things I've seen when I talk to nonprofit leaders is yes, you have operational budgets. Yes, you have a lot of things to fund, but I really think that, if you're having a specific campaign or you can say X dollars will help with this specific piece of a mission or vision. I think
Right.
being very clear and specific to show someone your money, if you're going to give at this level, here's what that would actually mean. Here's how it would
Mhm.
translate into funding the projects, funding the mission that we're doing. So it's not just this general vague ask that I think people can fall into that trap. I think that's a big part of it. And I think part of that is you don't want to make people work too hard to be able to say yes. The simpler you are, the more clear you are, the more specific you are in your ask, I think you make it easier for them to say yes. So being careful not to, once again, not to do that word salad thing
That's
where
it.
it's like there's just you're just talking and talking and talking. And so everything's all over the place. You're saying, here's who we are, here's our mission, here's our vision, here's a project we're working on, here's how your dollars could help in specific ways. I just think that's huge. And I also think just speaking from your heart.
Mhm.
Randy, this is a big one for me is speaking from your heart of why this matters so much to you, to those you serve, and how donors and followers can be attracted to you as a sold out leader, a passionate leader of the cause. Because I think that, like you said, people want to be generous. I think people want to contribute, but they also want to make sure that there's a true buy-in, that the
I
leader themselves is actually really invested themselves. And I think that's just really a big part of this to me when I think about it, because when you're speaking from the heart, you're just more passionate and it's more magnetic. It's more attractive to people that, man, I know that I can connect to this person and what they're doing because I can see the passion in their eyes. I can hear it in their voice. I
Mhm.
know they're all in.
For sure. As you were talking, you're right. I think sometimes nonprofit leaders know the data, they know the
Mhm.
facts, but when it comes to naturally communicating it in a way that engages people, I think there's some stumbling that happens there. And so a thought that came to me just as you were speaking, I said, well, what about if you just did some role playing in your
Mhm.
organization? A board
Mhm.
member is a financial partner, the president is the person obviously
Mhm.
seeking support. And so just role play that in a very
Mhm.
safe environment so somebody feels a little bit more comfortable in talking about what they
Mhm.
believe in and why they believe in it. Sometimes just doing some simple practice before you go out and talk to a person who runs a $10 million
Mhm.
business, because
Yeah.
they are pretty concise and clear all the time with what they do. And so, yeah, I see
Well,
that's important.
and not to interrupt you, but I think that one thing to keep in mind is those are busy people with their schedules, so you don't want to waste their time, right? You want to
That's
make sure that you're honoring them, respecting them in the conversation. And so I think the more clear you are, the more passionate you are, the more mindful of their time and their energy and what they have going on in their own lives and businesses. I think that shows a respect and that shows that you care about them
yes.
as a person, not just a checkbook.
Exactly. That's so good. And I love the point that you made. You need to clearly articulate what are the outcomes, what is the impact,
Mhm.
rather than sort of generalized, oh, this is what your gift is going to do, and it's sort of skipping over the meadow without really
Mhm.
saying, your gift of $5,000 is going to enable us to do
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
over the next 3 months. And so, perfect. Well, here's another question. Maybe it's not talked a lot about in the nonprofit world, but I think it's common for financial partners to give to the person himself or herself first in some ways rather than to the organization. Obviously, they believe in the vision. So it's a little bit like this. You're betting on the jockey rather than on the horse because
Mhm.
you say, okay, I know that person, I believe in who they are. And so it's that sense of connectedness with the individual. So, from your perspective of coaching executives, what's the difference between leaders who inspire confidence and investments? That's what we were talking about,
Mhm.
versus those who may inadvertently repel it, or even if their cause is worthy, somehow they just can't make that level of connection. You alluded to it a little bit in the
Mhm.
beginning on that issue of relationship development. Just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love your analogy of betting on the jockey, not the horse. I also think you could take it to the driver of a car, right? I mean, somebody's steering the car or the captain of a
Mhm.
ship. I mean, because the bottom line is the horse, the car, the ship, they're all the vehicles to accomplish something, but they have to have somebody that's steering and they have to have somebody that's keeping things, going in the right direction. So I think this goes back to being sold out first and foremost on what you're doing. Do you as a leader truly believe and value the cause you're promoting, or is it just a job you're doing? Right.
Mhm.
Because the sad reality is, and practical reality is, nonprofits are businesses and careers that people can simply apply for a job and get the job. So are they truly bought into the mission and vision themselves, or are they there because they're a nonprofit, leader or executive that has experience? So I think that buy-in is huge. Are they really sold out on the vision themselves first and foremost? John Maxwell, referring back to him, he says, the law of buy-in, people buy into the leader, then the vision. And I think
Right.
that's huge when it comes to what you're asking here. And the fundraising side is, do I trust that leader is going to accomplish that vision? Do I believe that they can take that that organization to where the mission, the vision says. So I think that's a big part of it. Just a quick analogy locally, there's a woman I know locally that's stepped into an executive director role of a nonprofit in an industry or a focus area that she was unfamiliar with, but she had a lot of nonprofit experience. But what happened for her was as she got going trying to help the organization in their fundraising efforts and advancing into the future, it was a 30-year-old organization. But what happened was she started to really get excited more and more as she entered. She said yes to the job because she believed in it, but she didn't know a lot about it at
Yeah.
the very beginning. But
Yeah.
now, 4 or 5 years later, she is somebody who is an advocate for that mission, for that cause, and she's helped raise millions of dollars and also found tons of grant money to help fund it, and the projects they've accomplished in the last 4 or 5 years versus what they've been able to do for the previous 30, it's
Yeah.
exponentially different. But I really believe it starts so much with what she did, by coming in and really owning that vision, buying into it, and really communicating it. Because I think passionate leaders, they're sharing how they're investing personally with their time, their money, their energy, even their connections of relationships. I think that are you truly all in, as a leader becomes the question that I would ask as a donor, because the reality is I think effective leaders are always going to be able to share where they see things going. And that vision, once again, goes back to vision and excitement. It attracts the right kind of people, but also repels the wrong kind of people who say, you know what, maybe your cause is great. It just may not be for me. That's okay.
Yeah.
But finding the right kind of people who are going to also be all in as they contribute and as they support and partner with you.
Yeah. I love that. I heard it said one time, something like this. Maybe it comes from Maxwell. Progress moves at the speed of trust.
Oh yeah.
And so to be asking the question as a nonprofit leader, how do I come to trust somebody else? So you're asking that of yourself.
Hmm.
And then you begin to reflect, okay, if that's what trust looks like for me to trust somebody else, how
Hmm.
can I create that same environment with
Yeah.
the business owner or the couple in their living room so that they come to the same place of saying, hey, I trust Chris, I trust Randy. And
Mhm.
then obviously that's a pretty huge foundation block that's in place.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the character side of things. I always talk about is, it's the law of magnetism of Maxwell. Who you are is who you attract. That's where my magnetic leadership content, the book I've written, the workshops I teach, and the speaking engagements I share, it kind of jumps off of that is that, well, what does it mean to be magnetic? Well, it first starts with who you are. And so as a leader,
Mm.
your character matters. And if you're sitting across the table and you're a trustworthy person with a great vision and a great cause, well, I think your likelihood of getting the donations and support and the buy-in and the promotion to other potential donors, I just think that, is exponentially going to elevate when they trust the heart and the character of the leader. So I think that can't be discounted, even though it may be overlooked or assumed. We have to make sure that it's an intentional thing that we guard our character, but also make sure that people know our character.
Yeah, love it. The last question, and then we're going to have a few quick ones at the end, is all around team culture. You've
Mhm,
been in the chamber. You have people that started the chamber, and then you want them to renew. You want them to
mhm,
continue. So we understand what it means to create value in
mhm,
people, so they renew. So they want to continue to be a
mhm,
part of it. So if you were coaching a nonprofit executive who needs to rebuild or rebuild the fundraising team or the culture. It just needs some development. Maybe they're burned out. Maybe it's a
sure,
siloed organization. The marketing department is not talking to the fundraising department, and
mhm,
finance department has some issues. And so those kind of things are happening. Or maybe they're just going through the motions.
mhm,
What's the first leadership, we're going to call it lever, that you would tell them to pull to create momentum so they
yeah,
do start working together? Because culture of a team is so critical.
mhm.
If it's healthy and vibrant, then it just spills out to everybody that is a part of what they're wanting to do.
Yeah, the first thing I always am going to recommend is getting to know your people, building relationships to understand their motivations, their desires, their challenges, so that you can then, as a leader, help them connect their own personal vision or desire and goals to the organization and the cause. Also, just making sure that there's alignment there, that sometimes people have been at it for a while and honestly they need a fresh perspective in a new place.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that sometimes has to happen, right? I've seen that happen. I've led people through that process. I think though, a lot of people, it's that mission drift, right? I'm so busy doing the job that I forget about the importance of what I'm doing, or I disconnect the mission from my day-to-day task. And so as you get to know people, really investing in the relationship, getting to know them as the person they are and their goals, their desires, like I said, I think that I think that's a huge part of it. Um, I think that, so there was I'll share when I first came to a church I was serving at years ago, there was dysfunction within some of the staff members. It was not like they were mad at each other, but there just was misalignment. They were struggling to be on the same page, sharing building space between like weekday programs and weekend programs. There were just all these things going on. And so I really, my first step was this. I started getting them all together in the same room to get on the same page. And we would meet, monthly, I think even bi-weekly at the beginning, to just get together more often. And then I would meet with them one-on-one and get to know them individually better, because I was new coming in from the outside, but I was trying to work with this culture issue. And I'll tell you, Randy, it didn't take very long. Once they were sitting together, having conversations, we were getting on the same page, realizing we were all trying to accomplish the same mission, but the challenges that were being faced, they were solvable, but there was just lack of communication, understanding each other's goals and desires of what they wanted to accomplish. So I think as a leader, when you sit down with your people, it's easy to be all task oriented, even having staff meetings where it's like it's all task driven, right? But
Sure.
there's another level where you can say, I want to get to know you. I want to hear your story, kind of hear where you are. Where do you feel like you're struggling? Where do you feel like you're thriving? How can I help you? How can the team help you? And just showing that there's that support system around them, I just think that helps morale. And then ultimately, if there are skill development things that need to be addressed, you can go from there. But that's coming from a different mindset in a different place, out of a place of caring for them and their success and the success of the organization. So that's where I always recommend is, when was the last time you really sat down with your team members? When was the last time you really had the heart to heart and you asked some of the questions about how they're doing, how they're feeling? And honestly, I've had several staff members over the years where through those conversations they realized, you know what, I have been burned out. I am burned out, and they needed to pivot and make adjustments in their career path, but also sometimes in the organization where they needed to adjust the work they're doing. So I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I love it. When you're talking, the phrase came to my mind, and it goes back to management quite a long time ago, where it said leadership by walking around.
Oh yeah.
Where in some organizations, the president or the chief executive officer sort of come to the office and walk into their office, and they're sequestered there, and then they walk home.
Right.
And I think, just if you said management by walking around, by going to somebody's office, their cubicle and whatever, I just
Mhm.
love what you're saying. There needs to be that level of connecting and understanding. How are the children? What's going on with the family?
Right.
Those things are so vitally important to create a sense of well-being, that we
Mhm.
care for one another. I know we want to avoid the thing saying, well, we're one big happy family. I understand that.
Sure.
But the issue of respecting people, because there's dignity in their lives and we value who they are. And we know that if they're satisfied, then when they pick up a phone to talk to a partner or a donor about a new credit card that they want to get online, it's not a snappy kind of a conversation. It's a very warm one, because
Right.
that's the culture that comes from the top down.
Yeah, and I love that. I've always talked about that. It's like, to me, that's what I think is overlooked. So, what I tell people all the time in my trainings is, you're not going to hear rocket science things out of my mouth, right? Like, I'm a simple guy. I learn in simple ways. I apply things simply. The problem for most leaders is it's not about they don't know what to do. It's the consistent intentional actions. And so what you're talking about, just being present, one of the things that really hit me years ago is that, we are one person. We are a holistic person. So if there's struggles going on at home, health issues, financial issues, relational issues, whatever it may be, you bring that to work. If you're struggling at work, you take that home. You
Yeah.
can't just shut off your brain. As much as we want to think we can compartmentalize, we really are terrible at it as human beings. And it affects, each side of the equations. I think that when you really care for the whole person as a leader, now it doesn't mean you have to cross professional boundaries. I know that you have to be careful, to some level, but I also think that some people are so afraid of those boundaries that they don't do what I would think is just, being a basic, human being. And I think that that just goes a long way when you're leading people.
Yeah, so true. All right. Well, I've got 5 quick questions at the end. So this has been very engaging. I think you're bringing to our audience some very practical ways of the culture, communication, clarity. So Let's end with some quick questions. More you as a person.
Okay.
So, what's the best piece of professional advice you've ever received?
It was when I was an intern in college. I was doing a summer internship, and when I was leaving, my supervisor said, "Chris, don't ever stop being teachable. Always be teachable." It was
Mhm.
something he saw in me, and it was something he really wanted to call out and challenge me to maintain. And that's been something I've never forgotten. And it's why I continually read and learn and study all the time.
Yeah. A fabulous bit of advice. What's one habit you cannot live without? One daily habit?
Yeah, it's my morning quiet time routine. I get up in the morning. For me, I read my Bible, I journal, I pray, I get ready for the day ahead of the day so that, I can't roll. I used to roll out of bed when I was younger. I'd roll out of bed and kind of, scurry to get ready and head out the door. I cannot do that now. Now I protect my morning routine so that I can truly be ready to tackle whatever comes. And it's been the game changer for me.
Yeah. Love it. Taking time for yourself to prepare yourself for what's ahead.
Right.
Well, here's a question that goes back. If you could imagine your 20-year-old self and went all the way back, what's one bit of advice you would have given to yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it would be trust the process of development because it's going to pay off long term. It's easy to be in a hurry. It's easy to want instant results, but the reality is growth experiences, they compound over time. So I trust the process. I think that would be something it would maybe help. It would maybe help me over the last 30 years to be a little more patient if I
Yeah.
understood to trust the process.
Yeah, that's good. I love it. So this next one digs a little more personally, but
Right.
I want you to think of an experience in your life that you probably would say, you know what, if I could do it over again, I would have changed something.
Mhm.
Maybe it was something that you felt you failed at, but because of that experience, it actually sets you up for
Mhm.
greater success. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the last job I had in a local church was we had a leadership crisis, I'll call it, with a lot of challenges among our leadership team. And it's actually what led me down this path of going and doing leadership coaching as a business and starting my business. And so while there were things that I wish I maybe would have done differently as my part of the situation, it
Mhm.
also was. I always tell people, I feel like God used it to kick me out of the nest, to
Sure.
expand my reach and what I do
Yeah.
as a leadership and business coach that I wouldn't have done on my own, most likely at the
Mhm.
time. So I think that once again, there are certainly lessons I learned that I can apply from that situation. But even the situation itself kind of led me down a path that I couldn't even see coming at the time, but I'm so
Mhm.
grateful for it now all these years later.
Yeah, that's good. Love the story. Last question. What's one place on let's say, a more of a regular basis you like to sort of disconnect? You go to recharge. Where would that place be? Could be locally, could be outside your local area.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely outside local. I'm in the Dayton, Ohio area.
Okay.
We love our community, but it's great to get out of town. No, for us, we have fallen in love with, we go to vacation every few years with friends down in Key Biscayne, just off of Miami, and we go to the Ritz-Carlton Resort at Key Biscayne, and it's kind of an semi all-inclusive type place and right on the beach, and it's like it's our haven. It's the place that we just look forward to all the time when we get to go do that. So it's been a great vacation spot several times for our family, and I can truly unwind and recharge and
Yeah.
just enjoy being there.
It's hard to beat the ocean.
It is hard to beat the ocean, and it's even harder when it's a Ritz-Carlton property on the ocean.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Few amenities added in to the process.
Exactly, yeah. You feel a little spoiled.
That's good. Chris, it's been a delight having you as a guest on the podcast, and just love to give you an opportunity to share with our audience ways they can connect with you if they want to explore. I know you're in a
Yeah.
coach and consulting kind of role, so
Mhm.
tell people a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, the hub of things for me is my website, McClureCoaching.com. So you could go to that and learn about my programs, my services. I have my own podcast as well, and the link is on there for that. And I blog weekly. My social media links are on there, but I'm also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I even have a YouTube channel where I share my own, videos each day as well. So yeah, I'd love to connect with you guys online. You can look me up, McClure Coaching, on those social media platforms. You'll typically find me. But once again, McClureCoaching.com is my website, and that's where you can learn more about what I do and the books I've written, the programs I have.
Fabulous. Well, so good. Well, Thank you, audience, for joining us again for this podcast. My name is Dr. Randy Dirks, and Funding Your Future Now is a regular podcast. Love for you to jump in anytime you can. You can also find me at randydirks.com. So that's it for this podcast. Thanks very much. Bye now.